In the heart of Iran, there is a forgotten ancient city named Persepolis. It has been more than 2,500 years since this city was built. In the ancient time, they called Persepolis the richest city under the sun. This city was the capital of the biggest empire the world had ever seen. But after this city was destroyed, for more than 2,000 years, it was buried and it became a forgotten city. The tablets and writings you find in the city tell us a lot about this empire and Persepolis itself. But there is also a lot of information the Greeks wrote about it. And at that time, Greeks were the #1 enemy to the Persians. And even though they were their biggest enemy, they only didn't write negative things about the empire. They wrote positive things as well. An empire that ruled the known world for more than 250 years. "2,550 years ago, Cyrus the Great started this giant empire. When the Greeks wrote about Cyrus the Great, they say that he was a charismatic person. And with the charisma he had, he got the attention of all the people around him. In a way that the people wanted to be in his empire. Cyrus started his journey in this location, and he managed to create the biggest empire, which one way stretched all the way to India, one side to Egypt and Ethiopia, the north all the way to Russia, and it even reached Greece in Europe. But this video is about the forgotten city of Persepolis, and that is why we're gonna talk about that city. Let's go to 2,515 years ago. The year Darius the Great wanted to make Persepolis the greatest city on earth. Darius the Great was the 4th king of the Achaemenid Empire. What you see of Persepolis today was buried under the dirt for more than 2,000 years, and there was little things showing up from the dirt. But when they realized there's this type of city under all this dirt, they decided to dig out the city. And they started this in the 1930s. After the work was done, clay tablets were found everywhere. In the world, there's only a handful of people that can read this writing. One of those is Dr. Maria Brosios. They found a lot of these clay tablets all over Persepolis, and this kind of showed that these were the invoices for the employees that worked there. When they were finished, they would bring the clay tablet to their boss and tell him, "We did this." Then the boss would engrave a writing. Basically write, you did this for this much money. In a world where everywhere slaves were used, this empire paid every worker. These clay tablets also show us that what this city was built with, like what the roof was made out of, what the floors were, everything was clear on these tablets. To understand this better, let's go 2,500 years ago to see this place and what it was like. The heart of this city is Apadana. This is where the king sat and waited for the guests. Guests from all over the empire would come visit the king to show their appreciation of the empire and the king himself. In this empire, everybody was equal. No religion, no color, no ethnicity was forbidden. And that is why most people wanted to be a part of this empire. This is the Apadana, an unbelievable place with an extremely high roof on extremely large one-piece pillars. The roof of this palace was made with cedar wood, a strong wood with a nice scent of smell. Another palace is the Xerxes Palace. All these buildings, plus the buildings where they had private meetings, all of them sat on a 15-meter high terrace. You can imagine how insane and huge it looked. The buildings in this city matched each other very well. The writings in Persepolis tell us a lot about the people here. And how equal people were back then. And you could see it by the statues. Here you can see the people bringing gifts to the king to show their appreciation. In this line of people, you see people from 3 different continents: Africa, Europe, and Asia. The works that stayed in one piece really show us what kind of workmanship they had back then. Persepolis was basically built to show the power of the empire. When people would come here for the first time and see this staircase, they would be in shock. Because never in their life had they ever seen something like this. This is the gates of all nations. Anywhere from the empire you wanted to visit the king, you would enter the palace from this gate. When you entered this gate, you would be in shock, and everything around you would seem unreal. The guests would enter through the gate and enter the yard. Then you see a giant terrace and the Apadana Palace. Anyone that entered this palace, they would not look on the floor, they would only be looking up, because they couldn't believe the roof they are seeing. Unlike every other empire, in Persepolis, you don't see anything about wars. It's all friendly designs, and you could even see people holding hands. In the writings of Persepolis, it says, "The king does not want war, he only wants peace." And one of the most valuable things you find in this empire is that no ethnicity, no religion is prohibited in this empire. Anybody that lived this empire pretty much didn't say negative things about it, because for more than 250 years, all this place lived peacefully and happily. Kings of the Achaemenid Empire believed when the people of the empire are happy, not only does the empire get stronger, the people get stronger, and the king gets stronger. This entire empire was always kept safe. Just think about it, at that time, an empire with this size and how hard it was to keep safe. This empire is more than 4,000 kilometers across. The Achaemenids built a lot of roads, and these are the main ones of the empire. It went from India all the way to Europe and Egypt. The Achaemenids were the inventor of the postal service as well. All over the empire, the packages would get there on time. In every little village, there was a postal place, and there were horses ready to work. And the mailman with the tired horse would show up, exchange the horse, and go on its way. If you didn't already know, Persepolis was built after Cyrus the Great. So let's go take a look at Pasargadae, a place where Cyrus the Great's palace and tomb is located. Pasargadae was the most advanced city of its time. This is the ruins of the city, which was located in the middle of a garden that was called Paradis. And the word paradise comes from this Persian word. This garden is the first garden in the world that had an irrigation system. And with this watering system, any plant or trees could be planted here. Xenophon says when Cyrus the Great would go anywhere, there had to be a garden there, and flowers, plants, and trees had to be there. In the Greek writings, it says, when Cyrus the Great was in his garden, he would say he has to do something to make this garden better before he eats for the day. Most of the trees that were planted in Pasargadae and Persepolis were fruit trees. Trees like mulberry, pomegranate, olives, and grapes. This insane empire had a lot of enemies, people that were jealous of this much power. Those people would see the people of the Persian Empire wear nice and colorful clothes, wear shoes, and have a good sense of fashion. But the Greeks would just use the white towel around them or wear nothing at all. Those people didn't like the Persians that they would wear nice clothes and colorful clothes, and from jealousy, they would make fun of them. If you want to put a nickname on Alexander, you would have to call him a thug. He would tell the people that were around him that the Persians are like women because they wear clothes and jewelry, and that is why they're scared people. Alexander decided to attack the Persian Empire so he can get riches. And unfortunately, the Persian Empire was under bad management, and it wasn't as organized as it used to be. Alexander used the opportunity and attacked the empire. When Alexander got to Persepolis, Darius III was already dead, and the empire had no king. But there was a brave soldier called Ariobarzan that put up a great fight against Alexander, and it slowed him down a lot. And they fought to the final soldier, and they died. Alexander enters Persepolis. Professor Lloyd Llewellyn Jones says Alexander was an extremely uncivilized human because he got extremely jealous when he saw Persepolis, because he didn't even know what to do with this place. Dr. Jones says they called these people back then mountain thugs, meaning a person that is uncivilized, and he enters the richest city under the sun. There are different stories about what happened when Alexander got there. One of them says he, with the people he was with, and the women he had, they were extremely drunk, and since Alexander wanted to show off in front of the people, he says in front of them that I could burn this whole place down. And he tells his men to burn the place down. But before he did this, he got all the jewels out of the city. And when Alexander got back to Macedonia, he had so much jewels that it affected the economy there. And this was all the jewels he stole from the Persian Empire. He set this entire city on fire, and you could still see signs of fire in this place. Dr. Maria Brosio says what Alexander did was kind of like a terrorist activity because there was no army in his way, and he was in a city with nobody in front of him, and just because of his jealousy, he set the whole city on fire.